This picture of one here.
Oh, I was going to say not in the book. Not in the rest.
I'm gonna look at the book while we're reading it.
Yeah, yeah.
See what pictures are there.
Although there's a road trip element.
Yeah, there's a road trip element. I know, in that Buick, I know. Knowing her, she'll figure out a way.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Especially with two or three.
Yeah, because you can't really.
It's okay.
It's
better weather, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, yes.
But we don't know anyone really there. Like, this is where we are, you know.
Well, I should see an autograph card, actually.
It's hard to tell. That's true.
That's definitely me. Oh, that's definitely her.
So, I'm sorry, these are 16?
Yes.
16 and 1.
So we
It'll
need
be,
17.
yeah,
Is there
it'll be
time?
a sign, no. It'll be a
Why don't we
sign.
just do it, I'll be,
Oh, okay. Good idea.
yeah, and I, because I have to leave to go up to this community preservation committee meeting because we're having public comment in part to get ready to store it. Well, I guess that's too long. You want to track of the program, as long as you allow him
They are, back in,
How are you going to get? 5.
All the movie motions you manage, amazing journal, music, just to hear this sort of cascading.
Which is what you gave me. Perfect. My 16 times tables are going to get better and better.
It's about the
Oh, that's okay.
Thank you.
Really, what year was that? I don't know. Or you liked it?
I did it all right.
all the challenges they do.
I think they have here, just one second. She has some
Thanks for
her institution. Everybody hated her as soon as she came, and over time, I think she won everybody's heart. And she made changes like, she went to the basement ward and she saw a ward that was all damp and moldy, and it was holding 80 geriatric patients, and she simply took a sign and wrote "condemned" and made the staff move the patients in one night. And there was nowhere to move them. But she said, no one is going to sleep in this ward anymore. And she nailed the sign over the door saying "condemned." That's her.
Isn't that great? His name is Isaac Heald. Ike Heald. He was a longtime patient at the hospital. This is taken in 1955. He's at the hospital. He had been, there's snapshots of him that go back 20 years before that. You know, I was told by a lot of people that everybody knew him. Everybody liked him. He always dressed up. You know, he had privileges. He could walk down. He did walk downtown. He had some money. People asked him why he's sticking around here. He says, well, this is where I live. You know, this is my home. But what a face, huh? This is one of Stan's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful portraits. We took people who had worked at the hospital, people we were interviewing, not always people who worked as sometimes patients, sometimes families of patients, advocates. But Stan tried to get them to go to places that were really meaningful to them, that were central to their work life or their experience in the hospital. and take the picture and stand at this one. This is Dr. Shirley Gallup. She came to the hospital in the late 50s, right when the Haskell building was opening, to be in charge of that unit. And she stayed around for a long time. During the bleakest years of the hospital, there was actually a moment where she personally was the only board-certified psychiatrist working at Northampton State Hospital. There were over 2,000 patients. And, you know, that got rectified. You know, they started contracting out the work and brought in UMass doctors initially and other people. But she started a group therapy group with manic depressive patients in the 1970s. And when we interviewed her at this time in the early 90s, that group was still getting together regularly, having dinner or lunch and inviting Shirley. All of them who were long out of the hospital, but they still had that personal connection to it. When you read your books, you'll see that on page 51, there's this beautiful image from 1930 of this room. And there's beautiful wood furniture, and they're sitting reading books, and they're dressed up beautifully and nice. 37 years later, 1967, an image of the same room, and it was published in the papers as a plea on behalf of the hospital. You know, we need more support, we need more money, we need to improve things. And then Stan took a picture of the same spot in 1991.
In 1999, I started a project that brought me close to many of you, but my oldest volunteer and my wisest was Mary, and I started my friendship with her then. It's been 15 years since she wore that windbreaker, and we worked together on the habeas corpus sound installation and the memorial events that took place back in 2000. By the way, we have the programs from that year here, and I found them this morning when I was packing for this, and you're welcome to see those. Mary worked at the hospital for, I don't know, will you tell us how many years?
35.
35 years, and her last role was to put the patients that needed to leave the hospital first, the geriatrics, that had no reason to be there, but really needed to be in nursing homes and nursing homes, needed to go back into the community. And the class action lawsuit that was filed in 1978 and was signed by Dukakis in 1979, Brewster versus Dukakis, was instrumental in getting patients to go back into the community. And Mary single-handedly placed more than 500 patients herself back in the community. And that in and of itself is a book. It is the story of a book of how she negotiated with nursing home directors to let the patients be in the nursing homes, because the nursing homes didn't want the patients. You do this?
Yeah. This is another one of the images that was done in 1967 and published in the local paper. We don't know who the people are. But you get a sense, you know, when this building was built, this was a single room, a room for a single patient. 1967. It's another great image of Stan's. He was around every step of the way as the place shrunk and shrunk and then got closed. So near the very end, in 1993, the patients that were in the buildings and memorial buildings across the street came back over to the Haskell building for the last move before the place was closed down. And Stan took some really eloquent shots of a patient and a staff member, you know, in that process of change. This is a room in the G building, which was part of the memorial complex across the street. All those buildings were built starting in the late 1920s, and they became the focus of care when the old hospital started to crumble. You can see, outside of this room, there's a lot of spaces that are also tiled, a lot of half walls with these big open space, bed after bed. It really wasn't a place that was anyone's idea of the right kind of place to care for people in need.
I'll say one more thing about this. It's actually so interesting when you look at the history of psychiatry. Psychiatry was struggling to be always accepted as a medicine. It was always sort of looked down on because it had taken care of everybody and become a welfare system in and of itself. So this was actually a way of looking medical. They were building in the 1950s these hospital buildings that were supposed to make it look like a hospital, not like an institution. So there's that in there, folded into that history that is hard to remember, but it's part of it. Oh, these are a little bit scrambled up, so I'm going to see. Oh, yeah. So here we are, it's 2000. We have wired up the whole hospital with sound, and I brought for you a sample of the cable that it took to wire up the whole hospital. Just to hand it around, just hold it. This is the electric cable that was needed. I think we had 5,000 feet of this, and it's almost unimaginable that we were able to go around the corners when you hold this. So just take a look at it. We wired up the entire hospital like an instrument. I made it sound like a cello, or like a violin, or like a guitar, and it was one of the most amazing things I've ever done. I'm so lucky to have been part of it, and so honored that so many of you joined me in that, and that it then only took 28 minutes, and it only sang for 28 minutes. It only was 28 minutes. But I always sometimes give talks somewhere in New Jersey, and I meet someone who says, I was there that day. So it had all these reverberations of people really needing that to come together. We can't just tear down a building. We sort of have to bring people together in order to let it be gone. And on that day, the community really did come together. I remember my friends all said to me, Anna, you've spent all this time and energy wiring up the building and going for 4 years through all the hoops and the red tape and all the permissions. Make sure that you don't get disappointed if no one shows up. And then there were thousands. And we had a forum of the stories of the patients, most importantly, who told their own stories at Smith College, thanks to Tom Riddell, who hooked us up with Smith College. Smith College hosted us like world-renowned speakers, and it was the patients of the hospital who told their own stories, and it was one of the most moving things. And you can see there's a PBS documentary that was made that day that you can find on the internet. It's called Habeas Corpus. That was the name of the project. And this is our last slide, and then we shall mingle and eat. I want to read to you what we... Maybe you want to. Do you want to read it?
Okay.
This is a staff member I interviewed who remembers Ernie, who finally is allowed to go back into the community. This is the footpath that leads us from the hospital to this day back into the town. That's still there.
May we all be so blessed as to have the privilege to walk in someone else's shoes long enough to feel where they pitch. I will never forget E, who always tried to unlock the day room door by shaking it over and over. He incessantly swept the floor in between door shaking episodes. Several years later, I had the rare privilege of working as staff in the very community-based group home where E was now living. And every evening, he would get up and unlock every door in the house. I understood in a deep way what he was doing. He was ensuring that he was free to come and go, no longer to be confined by a locked door, prevented his human right to the least restrictive environment possible. Excuse me. He was a blessing. He blessed me. It reminds me that no one can stop a person's spirit from the pursuit of happiness. The human soul cannot be confined, and no one could rob Eve of his deepest human instinct to be free.
There you go.
why we did this. I was approached by this company, Arcadia, for probably 8 years to write this book. And for 8 years I said no. And I said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I know what they always look like. They always look the same way on the inside. It's not creative. It doesn't have an interesting font. And they look like this in every town. And then I realized, wait a second. I have the person who should write this. And I contacted Mike. We ran into each other. I said, you should write this book. And he said, I'm not going to write this. I'm going to write it if we both write it together. So that's why we're here today. And thank you so much for coming. And happy launch.